6:33 a.m. Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. So we started the conversation this morning with you about the price increase from CAL, effective the 1st of January 2023. And joining us this morning with the conversation is Miss Diane Hadad, the chairman, of course, of the Tobago Chamber of Commerce. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning, Natasha. The chairman of the Tobago division of the TTCIC, please.
Thank you so much for the correction.
Yes, we have a little mix-up with these chambers now. We have plenty chambers, so I just want to be clear.
Well, thank you so much for that clarity. It's definitely noted so that we will ensure this does not happen again. And also, I mean, as we discussed off air, thank you so much for taking the time out of your morning. I know the Christmas season is upon us, and I'm sure you are just as busy as everybody else. And having the time to have this conversation that for many it's been a long time coming is very much appreciated. And tell us, is this something that you think was inevitable, Ms. Hadad?
Yes, I want to say that we have heard for years the CAL's justification or the government's justification in terms of the cost to carry the plane over. They are always saying that it's a loss to Caribbean Airlines and therefore the subsidies need to be addressed. And the government couldn't carry that burden and therefore the people had to pay it. And why should the government subsidize people flying to Tobago or from Tobago? But of course, there are many other aspects of that that needed to be looked at, why it was not addressed for quite some time. And I am hoping that that's where the discussion will go this morning in terms of why did we not look as a country to the other aspects of what could have and could not or should not have happened. But I guess as we go along, that will be in the conversation.
Oh, definitely. I mean, as you mentioned it, if we could just go straight into that, because again, we've heard repeatedly, as you've mentioned, that the cost of having these planes go back and forth is highly exceeding that which is being made in revenue. But as you mentioned, there are some other aspects that we do need to look into this morning so that we all can be aware of possible options and what we need to pay attention to moving forward. So what would you say are some of the key aspects that need to also be considered or should be considered?
Well, that's Natasha, right?
Yes.
Right. Natasha, the persons residing on the island of Tobago / Tobagonians, they do not have the facilities that are required for a normal life in terms of entitlements, you know,
right.
General good health facilities, different facilities that are required in terms of government offices and so to get certain basic things addressed. And therefore, individuals have no choice but to come to Trinidad to get it. Having said that, it means that every time the person from Tobago, and I always keep it from the Tobago perspective, because they are the disadvantaged people. Every time people from Tobago have to come to Trinidad, there is at least a minimum of a $700 to $1,000 increase or cost to what they have to do should they go by plane.
Right.
If they were to go by the boat, I'm just going to throw it in quickly. There is the other factor to time, the length of the time it takes to get from Tobago to Trinidad and vice versa. And that, in essence, also gets a calculation into cost because your time is money. So if I were to deal with CAL only, and let's leave the port off the table for today as we are not having that discussion, but it is on the increased fare for CAL. If we are treating with a $200 airfare one way, it's $400. I want us to note that CAL had first introduced the $50 penalty fee if you were not to travel on the flight that you were booked on. And therefore, that's a one-way fee. So most times people do have issues, whether it's traffic issues, whether you can't get the flight that you want, but you need a ticket in your hand
Yes.
in order to even stand a chance. And so technically the cost of a ticket can take you to $500 very easily based on that formula. So we have been paying a $50 fee for one-ways in terms of if we were to miss the flights. And I mean, there were concessions along the way based on the pandemic, and they moved it and they put it back and so, but it is installed now. And so the cost, should you miss your flight, is a $50 penalty as well. The conversation keeps going down the road of persons speaking to how you pay a penalty if you're traveling here for international or whatever. And so the airfare and so on, people are taking away the real conversation, which is that this air bridge is an essential service to the people of Tobago. And I will say it, firstly, the people of Tobago. It is an essential service. So you have elderly persons who come down for dialysis and different things to get heart specialists, and particularly medical is where it will first hit home. I know I heard the Prime Minister say, let the THA make decisions and help those people out. So that's where going back to social welfare in some sort. And therefore, you must now go cap in hand begging for $100 subsidy or $200 subsidy to come for medical. Mm-hmm. Weighing down more on the system, whereas we are all entitled to be able to move freely between Trinidad and Tobago, because you are allowed to move freely between Point Fortin and Port of Spain. And the subsidies that are used for the Port Authority really doesn't have a limit, neither does the PTSC. And we have a problem wondering why, in the years of BWIA, when we had a Caribbean Airlines, sorry, not Caribbean Airlines, Air Caribbean, run by Mr. Lucky Samaru and team, BW at the time went all out to ensure that they were the national carrier on the air bridge. And they would have gone into an agreement with Air Caribbean to give up part of the domestic in trade-off for a Miami spot. Of course, in 9 months, that quickly killed Air Caribbean financially. And so we never got back to Air Caribbean being able to survive that. And so they immediately were debunked, and we ended up having BW doing the route. Now that turned into Tobago Express, and we went on now to Caribbean Airlines. So I like to put things in perspective as to the history of things, because under Air Caribbean, we had a fantastic on-time service, hour on the hour. And we were not required to do the number of crazy things that we are required to do now, of course, but it doesn't matter. What matters for me is that at the time, government has always been hand and foot in our state airline. And the history states that they would have been part of the decision-making process, whether it is Mr. Minister now or Mr. Minister then. It doesn't matter. It is government that has been involved in this ever since. And government being involved in this ever since, the people of Tobago are entitled to some sort of fair treatment in terms of them. So the island, Natasha, is not developed the way it should be in terms of the access to necessary things.
Ms. Hadad, thank you so much for that. I'm terribly sorry. I don't intend to cut you off, but we do have another guest joining the conversation this morning, Ms. Carol Ann Birchwood-James. So let's bring her in. Ms. Birchwood-James, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your patience, and thanks for being with us this morning. Tell us, how do you think this increase is going to affect, if at all, Tobago tourism?
Well, it's a wait and see. This is how we will put it. But we will say this. I listened to Ms. Hadad, and she has outlined the history and so on. So I would say that we have some demands to make on the government, as well as the Port Authority, as well as Caribbean Airlines. So let us start with Caribbean Airlines. We had to get the Prime Minister to give us that, to return that flight to New York, and you've got it on a Thursday. People find it very inconvenient. So here's what. We are asking for you to bring it back to the Sunday, and maybe we could have a second flight direct to New York. We also want one to Miami. And also, we've been asking for the last 12, 13 years for a direct flight to Canada from Tobago return. So these are the kind of things. You're raising the fear. It's increased inconvenience, and this is a very hard time for a lot of people. So you have to find extra money for that airfare to Trinidad. And we are saying, all right, it's a decision that has already been made in the budget. It's going to be implemented in a few days' time. But we have to get some things in return if we want to progress. We have that nagging situation with the flight, the last flight coming out of Trinidad and out of Tobago. We used to have that midnight flight. I've flown it a few times. You could come to Trinidad or you could come to Tobago. You could attend events, tourism events, weddings and all that kind of thing, and still return to Trinidad or to Tobago. Now, your last flight is something like 9:30. That has to be crazy. We have visitors as well as Tobagonians sleeping in the airport in Piarco once again. That had stopped with the introduction of the midnight flight. We now have people sleeping in the airport or have to now find additional hotel fare to stay overnight. That is unacceptable. You are raising the fares and so on. You have to give us the service that we want. We already, like Diane said, nobody's paying to go from Port of Spain to San Fernando. We are already paying that toll from Tobago to Trinidad. This is for tourism purposes. It's for medical, as Diane said. And what about our students? I did a postgraduate course about 3 years ago. The course was $15,000. It cost me $30,000 to do that course coming from Tobago because you have double days, I have to spend on hotel and all of that. The people from Trinidad spend $200-300 in gas, and they did the same course. So this is a kind of thing that people do not think about when you increase airfare and inconvenience of Tobagonians wanting to get educated, wanting medical attention, and of course, our vital tourism. So I am asking, I'm saying, you've made that decision, you didn't consult us, but we want certain things in return. And that also goes to the port. You need an earlier, leave Tobago at an earlier time so we can have 8 o'clock appointments, 9 o'clock appointments for those people who cannot afford the airfare. The boat leaving at 6:30, and it's now a 3-hour sailing to Port of Spain. It used to be 2.5 hours. It's now 3 hours sailing. So you are getting there from 9:30. By the time you disembark the boat, it's 10:30. So we need, you can't just increase fares like that. There must be consultation, and we have demands because some of these things just do not suit us. But you're not talking to us, or if you're talking to us, you ignore us. And it cannot be business as usual in that kind of a way. We have to now sit down, the authorities have to sit down with everybody, tourism officials and so on, because the kind of things, for example, if a visitor has to spend money or to stay in a hotel overnight, that is at 9:30, 10 o'clock. They've arrived at that time. That's extra cost. Do I want to come to Tobago? Isn't it easier for me just to go to Grenada? It's a direct flight to Grenada or St. Lucia and done with that. You still have to get another flight to Tobago tomorrow. You see, so there are a lot of issues here, and it's time the authorities deal with them.
There are definitely a lot of issues, and unfortunately we have run out of time. Ms. Carol Ann Birchwood-James and Diane Hadad joining us this morning for a critical conversation on the increase in fares. Ladies, thank you so much, and hoping that we have you back again soon to go back into this discussion. Stay tuned. This is the Now Morning Show. Coming up next, it's another critical Tobago conversation.